Canada remembers and reflects at the National War Memorial.
Why is it important that we remember? Because they fought for our country.
Plus, the ceremony dedicated to Indigenous veterans whose contributions were long ignored.
They served willingly for the defense of Canada.
Also on this Monday night, worries about a supply chain drain, the detrimental domino effect of 2 labor disputes.
Trade is our economic lifeline.
Trump's looming immigration crackdown, the fears millions of families could be ripped apart. And 10,000 poppies crocheted with love.
Once I heard of this project, I thought, I'm in.
One town's blossoming tribute to veterans.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Lest we forget, those 3 words from a poem by Rudyard Kipling are both a warning and a reminder that is repeated every Remembrance Day. At the National War Memorial today, it was on the minds of everyone not to forget those who answered the call of duty and never came home, and those who returned damaged, some with invisible scars. This year's Silver Cross mother lost both her children. They served in Afghanistan and came home broken, unable to overcome PTSD. Good evening and thanks for joining us. We rarely take time out of our busy lives to reflect on what sacrifice and service means. Mackenzie Gray takes us through today's ceremony in Ottawa.
A show of respect for decades of service. Canadians young and old turning out in the thousands at the National War Memorial to honor those who fought for Canada.
You have to pay your respects to all those who answered the call, didn't make it back, and the ones that did make it back and carry the scars. Well, it's the least we can do is come out for a couple of hours and pay our respects.
Scars that 98-year-old Second World War veteran John Priest still has.
The war ended 2 weeks after I got wounded, so I planned that pretty good.
Shot by a German sniper while liberating the Netherlands, Priest managed to make a full recovery.
I want to show respect for the boys that didn't come back, and also the boys who were wounded badly.
2024 is the 80th year after D-Day, the turning point in the Second World War, which more than 44,000 Canadians didn't make it home from. Paul Catt came to Ottawa from Saskatchewan to honor his late father, who returned from the Second World War with this bag and the bullet that nearly killed him while he was sleeping.
I remember that story like, wow, because he could have turned his head and that would have been, I wouldn't have been here.
The annual ceremony, an emotional one for many in attendance.
In a world often divided, the unwavering bond among our troops serves as a beacon of strength for us all.
Also recognition of the 100th anniversary of the Royal Canadian Air Force, which for Eugene Clifford is a family affair, following in the footsteps of both his parents into the Air Force.
I've enjoyed every single minute of it. You know, they say if you enjoy what you do, you don't work a day in your life.
The proceedings closing with the thousands in attendance placing their poppies on the tomb of the unknown soldier. A small sign of thanks for the sacrifices that Canadians will never forget. Mackenzie Gray, Global News, Ottawa.
The national service is always at the Cenotaph in Ottawa, but in recent years, another ceremony started taking place a little earlier in the day, just a short walk away, at the National Aboriginal Veterans Monument. It was raised in sacred and everlasting honor to the thousands of Inuit, Métis, and First Nations veterans who served with honor and distinction in war and on peacekeeping missions over the years. The monument was unveiled in 2001. It's designed by Lloyd Pinay. He's an Indigenous sculptor and painter whose father served in the Second World War. For decades, Indigenous veterans fought and protected our country, yet they were disrespected, their critical contributions ignored, and for a long time, Indigenous veterans didn't play a role on Remembrance Day, so this service is especially meaningful to them.
It does really mean a lot because before we were not even really allowed to join the main ceremony on November 11th. So this monument has only been there for the past 23 years. And this is a place where Indigenous people can gather and pay respect for all our people that we lost during these wars.
My friends and some of my friends who didn't come home, I feel they need to know that they're somewhere and I'm still thinking about them. That never goes away.
A little later, we'll look at how an Ontario community's passion project has grown into one of Canada's biggest Remembrance Day tributes. But first, two of Canada's busiest ports are at a standstill. Workers at the Port of Vancouver have been on strike for a week, and a lockout was imposed on striking workers at the Port of Montreal on Sunday night. According to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, about $1.2 billion worth of goods passes through those two ports every day. Anne Gaviola is looking at the impact on trade. Anne.
Donna, supply chain experts are warning of the domino effect that will ripple through the Canadian economy as labor disputes halt the flow of goods in and out of the country's two most important trade ports. Traffic at the Port of Montreal came to a halt Sunday night when the Employers Association locked out nearly 1,200 longshore workers. The Port Authority says this disruption also impacts more than 10,000 workers in the logistics sector, from trucking and rail to maritime agents and pilots. The Canadian Union of Public Employees says members voted 99.7% to reject the Maritime Employers Association's latest proposal. CUPE says it will accept the same wage increases granted to its counterparts in Halifax or Vancouver, 20% over 4 years. Major concerns also include scheduling and work-life balance. The employer is calling on the federal labor minister to step in. Stephen McKinnon tweeted Friday that he's monitoring negotiations. He says both sets of talks are progressing at an insufficient pace, indicating a concerning lack of urgency.
Trade is our economic lifeline. Trade is what drives our economy. We keep seeing repeatedly over the last number of years snags that are affecting our ability to get our products to market.
The labor dispute in Vancouver, Canada's busiest port, is already wreaking havoc on about $800 million worth of activity per day. Now, all of this comes on the heels of rail strikes and the threat of a looming Canada Post strike, dealing one economic blow after another to businesses across the country and harming Canada's reputation as a reliable trade partner. Donna?
Anne Gaviola in Toronto. Thank you, Anne. Well, he won't formally take office until January, but already the world is trying to figure out how much of Donald Trump's talk is just bluster. During the campaign, he promised to deport millions of people who are in the U.S. illegally. And today, Trump announced he's chosen the man who will carry that out. Jackson Proskow on America's new border czar and what he said about mass deportations.
On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program.
Donald Trump has made no secret of his plans, vowing a vast crackdown on the estimated 11 million illegal immigrants in the U.S.
It's going to be the largest deportation of criminals. We're going to get them out of here fast.
To do it, he'll appoint immigration hardliner Stephen Miller as Deputy White House Chief of Staff.
America is for Americans and Americans only.
And Trump will tap his former acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Tom Homan, as border czar. Homan oversaw record levels of deportation during the Obama administration.
If I'm in charge of this, my priorities are public safety threats and national security threats first.
The question is where they're going to find that population.
Another former ICE director, John Sandweg, believes that to meet Trump's quota, ICE will have to round up more than just criminals and will begin targeting undocumented immigrants from every corner of American society.
I wouldn't be surprised if he has in mind some internment-style camps on military bases.
He warns of another family separation crisis brewing, similar to when the Trump administration separated children from their parents at the border. This time, it could impact the 4.4 million children born in the U.S. who are citizens and have at least one parent who is here illegally.
And what that means is families being potentially ripped apart here.
The incoming administration has suggested there is a way to work around that.
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
All of it fueling a sense of deep unease in immigrant communities, including those with temporary protected status who fear Trump will force them out of the country. For millions of immigrants in America, the future depends on whether Trump delivers on all that he has promised. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
Donald Trump has announced his pick to be ambassador to the United Nations. She is Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, who Trump describes as an incredibly strong, tough, and smart America First fighter. A longtime ally of Trump, she is also a staunch supporter of Israel and has been a vocal critic of anti-Semitism on college campuses over the last year. Stefanik also supports Israel's decision to cut off aid for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine, the largest distributor of humanitarian aid in Gaza, and she wants a complete reassessment of U.S. funding of the UN. In southern Ukraine, another round of Russian airstrikes have killed at least 6 people. Local officials say 5 were killed in Mykolaiv and 1 in the Zaporizhia region. 19 people were injured, including children. And the Kremlin is denying media reports that President-elect Donald Trump had a call with Vladimir Putin warning the Russian president against escalating the war in Ukraine. One final kickoff coming up. A Canadian soccer legend wraps up her professional career. Wildfires are spreading in the American Northeast, and an 18-year-old volunteer park ranger has been killed by a falling tree while fighting the Jennings Creek wildfire. It's burning along the New Jersey-New York border, and it's causing unhealthy air quality there. Tinder-dry conditions created by unprecedented drought have led to the worst fire season in the region in more than 2 decades. 2024 is on track to be the hottest year on record, and as nations gather for the latest UN climate change conference, there is a lot of skepticism. Looming over that meeting is the fact President-elect Donald Trump will be back in the Oval Office. The American envoy at this COP29 summit calls that bitterly disappointing for anyone dedicated to climate action. Delegates at the meeting are supposed to agree on a new financial target, how much wealthier countries are prepared to pay poorer ones to adapt to climate change. Redmond Shannon looks at what's at stake.
Baku, Azerbaijan, the world's first oil town, hosting the UN's annual conference on tackling climate change.
Ladies and gentlemen, we must invest today to save tomorrow.
Atop the agenda, establishing a fund to support developing nations to transition away from fossil fuels and to deal with the effects of climate change.
The more we help them, the less some of those people will want to come to our countries because of climate impact.
The world's richest nations are responsible for the majority of global emissions. The harshest impacts are felt by some of the poorest. The solution won't be cheap.
From 1 to maybe around 1.3 trillion US dollars per year.
Also up for debate is who pays. Rising powers like China and Saudi Arabia are still exempt from binding rules.
We know it's going to be extremely contentious.
In this, likely the hottest year on record, there is a long shadow cast by Donald Trump. The president-elect of the largest historical emitter is likely to withdraw from the entire Paris Accord process, as he did in his first term.
We're going to inaugurate a president whose relationship to climate change is captured by the words hoax and fossil fuels.
Major world players won't attend this summit in person, including Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau, along with leaders from China, Russia, France, Germany, Australia and Mexico, to name a few. Canada's climate change minister Stephen Guilbeault admits Canada needs to do more.
Canada also does not have a stellar record on climate change. We've missed every target that we've set.
How much action will this summit fuel? Even agreeing on the agenda took hours longer than expected Monday. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
It's officially a wrap for Canadian soccer trailblazer Christine Sinclair. She played her final professional game last night. Sinclair was substituted off her last match with the Portland Thorns, leaving the pitch one last time. She's got nothing more to prove. The 41-year-old from BC has 3 Olympic medals, including gold, and she has scored a world record 190 international goals in her 24-year career, the most of any player, male or female. Ahead, this year's Silver Cross mother who lost both her sons reflects on the invisible scars of war. Military families know what service and sacrifice means, and Maureen Anderson carries more pain than many. Both of her sons, Ron and Ryan, died after they returned from serving in Afghanistan. They were broken by that war and never recovered psychologically. Maureen Anderson is this year's Silver Cross Mother, representing all the mothers who have lost children in the service of their country. Heidi Petracek has her story.
This one here is Ron and Ryan together.
Maureen Anderson wasn't surprised when her boys joined the Canadian Armed Forces as soon as they could.
When they got a little bit older, they were always playing army games continuously, way back. Right from there, they were destined to go to the army.
Maureen's father fought in the Second World War, her grandfather in the First, and she was a nurse in the Royal Canadian Air Force, which is how she met her husband, Peter, of the Royal Canadian Regiment.
Yeah, he was one of my patients, and he asked me out for a date, and the rest is history.
Their only children were born 5 years apart. Ron, the oldest on the left, the mischievous one with an infectious laugh. Ryan on the right, quieter, more serious. Each left high school early to enlist, first training at nearby CFB Gagetown.
And this is Ryan's graduation, me for the battle school.
They served multiple tours overseas, Bosnia, Ethiopia, Haiti. Then came Afghanistan. Ron went first in 2003, then was joined on his second tour by his younger brother in 2007. During that deployment, 6 Canadians were killed by a roadside bomb. 5 were friends the brothers knew from Gagetown. Maureen was relieved when her sons came home alive.
How did you feel when they were back?
Oh, I was so glad to see them. So glad to see them.
But her boys had changed. They were later diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD led to Ron's death in 2014 at 39 years old. Only after his passing did his parents learn he'd been recognized for heroism during his time in Afghanistan.
He helped save a little boy's life that was hit with a car right ahead of them, I guess. He must have been in his Jeep or something. And he jumped out to help the boy, and the guy that was with him said, "No, don't get out, you're crazy." And he said, "No, I'm not leaving that little boy on the road."
His older brother's death hit Ryan hard as he struggled with his own psychological trauma. Ryan died in 2017 at 38.
And what advice would you have for other mothers who have children going through PTSD because of their service?
Stay with them, support them, hug them.
Maureen's husband, Peter, died a year after Ryan. She visits all their graves almost every day.
Don't think about the sad stuff. Just think of the good things we had and the good laughs.
She draws strength from the grandchildren her sons left behind, one of them also in the military. Maureen's life has been defined by military service, a legacy of pride and pain. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Oromocto, New Brunswick.
I'm David Aiken in Almont, Ontario, and coming up next, I've got a story about 10,000 poppies.
The poppy is a powerful symbol of remembrance, and Canadians have been wearing them for more than 100 years. Now a group of volunteers has spent the past few months sewing, stitching and crocheting a beautiful woolen poppy display to honor our veterans and their sacrifices. David Aiken explains how the project started and how it's bringing a community together.
When it comes to the fabric of her community, you could say Sue Jakins has her fingerprints all over it. She's been making poppies.
And it's a pleasure. It's a little, it's not hard to do. It's pretty easy. And I think there's a piece to it, quiet.
First one, then 2, 3, a dozen, then dozens more. She's been one of more than 200 volunteers who have been sewing for months in this quiet Eastern Ontario town of Almont.
Once I heard of this project, I thought, I'm in. Then I went looking for red wool. Could not find red wool anywhere in Almont.
Mary Rosenberg got the project off the ground, inspired by something similar that she'd seen in St. Andrews, New Brunswick.
It was stunning, and I thought, I got to bring it back to Almont.
The library, the town council were all quickly on board.
I thought it was a great idea. And I knew the community would get behind it. There's such an interest of grassroots projects. There's so much pride in military history.
But the project surpassed Mary's or anyone's expectations. More than 10,000 poppies were created, each stitched onto some netting and hung at the cenotaph, at the Old Town Hall, at the Legion, and elsewhere.
This community cares, really cares, and now, 10,791 poppies have been done. It's mind-boggling.
Each volunteer had their own reasons for helping out. For Mary, it was about her dad, Lieutenant John Rosenberg, who served as an Army rifleman with NATO forces in Germany at the height of the Cold War, and about Mary's daughter, Navy Captain Kelly Williamson, who continues to serve at National Defense Headquarters.
I'm a very proud mom of her accomplishments.
An unexpected byproduct of the Poppy Project, when people got together to sew at a seniors' residence, in school groups, at knitting clubs, they told stories. Stories about how their relatives served and continue to serve.
Even some veterans participated in this. And some of the stories I've got, as I've read them, just brought tears to mind. And brought tears, and it's amazing.
And that storytelling, that remembering, that, as it turns out, was the great value of Almont's 10,000 Poppy Project.
Rather than focus on lest we forget, let's focus on let's remember.
David Aiken, Global News, Almont, Ontario.
And that is Global National for this Monday, November 11th. I'm Donna Friesen. We say goodbye tonight with some poignant moments from today's National Remembrance Day Ceremony in the nation's capital. Thanks for watching.